Hi everyone and welcome to Lesson 5. Today's lesson is called Analysis Review. We're just going to be reviewing the process of analysis and then talking about how to apply all this information to our essay for this week. So just to get ourselves oriented, today's lesson is also on analysis. So we're focusing more on the analysis part of this Writing Research Analysis course. Let's go ahead and start by defining analysis. Analysis, in simple terms, is the process of taking things apart, taking apart something that's complex in order to understand how the individual parts work together. If you think about a clock, if you think about a computer, if you're going to analyze that, if you're going to analyze how a computer works, one of the best ways of doing that would be taking it apart and understanding how each part contributes to the way that the computer runs. So that's the same thing we're going to be doing with our essay. We're going to be taking a complex topic like Titanic heroes and 9/11 heroes, breaking that down, breaking it into smaller parts, taking those smaller parts and looking for even smaller parts. So really understanding everything on the ground level so that when we put it back together, we have a much more complete understanding of that topic. So analysis is basically taking something apart so that you can understand it better. And if you were here for our forum class earlier this spring, you learned that there are 3 different types of thinking. First of all, there's just the concrete observations, things that you can observe with your 5 senses. So for instance, you might say that the Titanic heroes were tall and they wore life vests, and so kind of basic observations like that. That's where we have to start. It's very basic, and they're concrete observations. They're things that you can observe, things that you can notice with your 5 senses, with your sense of sight, your sense of smell, probably not taste, but that is one of your 5 senses, and touch and hearing. So something that you can observe with your 5 senses. Now, the second level of thinking, on a higher level of thinking, this is where you get into abstract ideas. And the word abstract means things that are real but unable to be observed with your 5 senses. For instance, you might say that the Titanic heroes were brave. So is bravery something that you can touch or something that you can smell? Not really, but it's still real, right? It's on this abstract level, on this level where it's real, but you can't observe it with your 5 senses. Okay, so that was the second level of thinking, and there's also a third level of thinking, which is the overall message. And most photographs, advertisements, books, newspaper articles, blogs, any object that you might analyze, most of those have one main message, one main point. And so once we made these general observations and kind of grouped together those general observations under different abstract ideas, then we can look at those abstract ideas and try to piece together what is the overall message of this entire book or of this entire advertisement. So that would be the third level of thinking. Now you might be wondering, how do I get from observations to abstract ideas? How do I make that jump between just making observations and actually coming up with these abstract words? Words like bravery or fearlessness or hope or unselfishness. How do we come up with words like that? Well, again, if you were here for our forum course, you will remember these 10 analytic verbs that help us move from that first level of thinking to that second level of thinking, jumping to a higher and higher level of thinking. So words like conveys, represents, demonstrates, portrays, creates, indicates, symbolizes, mirrors, signifies, and implies. These 10 verbs help us think on that higher level. So, for instance, maybe there was someone aboard the Titanic who gave up his life vest. So that's something you could picture. That's something that you could observe with your 5 senses. You could actually see the person taking off his life vest and giving it to another person. That's on that concrete observation level. So how do we move from that level to the level of an abstract idea? Well, these 10 verbs can help us. So you might say something like, when the man, I don't know exactly a name, when the man took off his life vest and gave it to the person struggling next to him, that conveys his unselfishness. So can you see how the word conveys helps us think, what does that convey? When someone takes off something that could save their life and gives it to someone else, what does that paint a picture of? What does that convey? And that helps us think of a word like unselfish. So I hope that these 10 verbs help you as you try to think on that deeper level of thinking. On your Venn diagrams, hopefully you are getting a nice collection of words, words that describe the Titanic heroes, words that describe the 9/11 heroes, and then hopefully also a lot of words that describe both the Titanic and the 9/11 heroes. Remember, this week we are comparing these two groups of heroes, and comparing means finding ways that they are similar, ways that the Titanic heroes are like the 9/11 heroes. So I'm not sure what kind of words you have on your Venn diagram. Maybe you have mainly concrete observations. Maybe you have lots of heroes aboard the Titanic and lots of heroes on 9/11. Well, that's more on that concrete observation level. So you can use that list of 10 verbs to help you change that observation into an abstract word. So if you're trying to think on a deeper level, hopefully those words will be helpful to you. I think it would be much easier when you write your essay if you have abstract ideas on your Venn diagram versus just concrete observations. It would be kind of boring if your whole essay was on, well, heroes aboard the Titanic wore hats, people at 9/11 wore hats, therefore they are similar in that way. That'd be kind of a boring essay. You'd have a lot more to say, I think, if you were talking about how they were both unselfish or both fearless. So try to get up to that abstract level of thinking. Okay, so we've talked about the 3 levels of thinking and also how to get up to a higher level of thinking. Let's go ahead and talk about different ways that you can develop your essay. And these are just ideas. As I mentioned in the last lesson, you all are becoming more advanced, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how to organize the middle part of your essay or the middle part of each paragraph. So you will have a main focus for each paragraph. You'll have a paragraph question. But exactly how you choose your sub-questions and how you develop and analyze that point is up to you. But here are some suggestions. I would recommend defining the characteristic that you see in both the Titanic and 9/11 heroes. So if you're talking about faith, well, it might be good to tell your readers what faith is. So defining your terms and also explaining what you mean. So just because you present a definition doesn't mean that your audience completely understands it. So kind of explaining it in simpler terms might be a good idea. You can also describe the characteristic and then illustrate the characteristic. And don't forget to illustrate that, because we're not just talking about a characteristic, we're pointing out something that you see in the Titanic heroes and something that you see in the 9/11 heroes. So it's totally up to you how you want to organize your paragraph. You could start off with a definition and then present one illustration from the Titanic, one illustration from 9/11. Or you could start with illustrations and then afterwards explain each illustration. It's totally up to you, but just to give you some ideas, I wanted to give you this slide. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up this lesson by going over the assignments, watch the video lesson, and then spend half an hour researching this topic. It's quite a big topic, the Titanic, and hopefully your research from last week will kind of help you. It's on the same ship, so sort of applies. And then add 5 quotes that you found to the Fakebook pages. And just to be super clear, the quotes don't have to be actual quotes, like quotes that you would find in a quote book. These can be sentences that you quote from a good article. So it doesn't have to be a literal quote. And then lastly, submit your progress report. Okay, so just in summary, remember that analysis is all about taking things apart in order to understand them better. So you want to make sure that you analyze your topic and then help your audience understand exactly what you mean by a certain characteristic, explain it, illustrate it, really take it apart so that your audience understands it just like you understand it. And then just realize that analysis takes time to think about your characteristic, and also time to research it. So this wraps up lesson 5 on analysis review. I hope it was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.